What's up, everybody? I am Raymond Summerlin. This is the Sharp Angles podcast, the Sunday recap edition of the Sharp Angles podcast. That means that I could only be joined by Tucker Bagley and Curtis Hirsch to talk about week 14 of the NFL season. An odd week, a week that had some injuries, a week that had a game that almost finished 0-0, which was imminently exciting to watch. A week that still has action ongoing with the Buffalo Bills as we're starting to record this. By the way, we record this every single Sunday at 7:30 Eastern, live on YouTube. Come and join us if you're listening to us via podcast. As we're starting to record, the Bills and Chiefs game is still going on. We have the Bills up 2017. Just under the 2-minute warning, Patrick Mahomes looking to break Bills' hearts once again. Some confusing late game stuff, Curtis, from the Bills. We're not going to talk it. We're going to let this game finish, but just this Bills team sometimes, man, they might get the win here, but this Bills team, Curtis, sometimes I'm just like, what are we doing?
Yeah, with that penalty call, the illegal contact call, they probably had a chance to run the ball and kill some clock and kick a last-minute field goal because James Cook has been cooking on all day, but they somehow used up 12 seconds and give Mahomes a full 2 minutes left to score a touchdown to win or field goal to tie. So very, very strange, but that is the season that is the Buffalo Bills.
No, it's fun. It is fun when a team is exactly who they have been. Like the Chargers are always exactly who we think they are, and that's always fun to watch. Meanwhile, I mean, Tucker, we've got a huge game tonight. We're recording this ahead of Sunday Night Football. Both of you on competing ends, competing side. I see some Cowboys gear on Curtis here. I don't see if you had any Eagles gear on there, Tucker. So we are
I actually have a Warren
getting ready
Sharp
for
shirt
it.
on them, representing the company here.
There we go. That's what I like to see. So how we feeling, Tucker, ahead of this?
I mean, if you're expecting an Eagles win, I just wouldn't. I think the Eagles defense has been a concern the whole season, and what we saw last week from San Francisco, really poking holes in the back end of it, going against an offense like Dallas, who's averaging 40 points per game at home. Listen, maybe they can figure it out. Maybe last week was humbling enough to where they, are able to turn things around and put forth a good effort, but I'm expecting a high scoring game. And right now the Eagles entered the game, I think 24th in points per game allowed. And I think they're dead last in third down defense. They'll have Bradley Roby back, which will maybe make it a little bit easier to cover CeeDee Lamb out of the slot, but I'm not terribly confident the Eagles can win this game. They're underdogs. And I think for a good reason.
So there you have it. If you're listening to this on Monday and the Eagles come out winning, then you'll know that Tucker's reverse jinx there worked to perfection. It was an outstanding reverse jinx. But yeah, we can't talk about that game. That game's coming up soon. Let's get in while we're waiting on this Buffalo Kansas City game. Let's talk about a very interesting game between one team that's really good and one team that I think is quietly very good. During this broadcast of the Ravens and Rams game, the announcers kept talking about how surprising of a scoreline it was that the Rams were hanging with the Ravens, which I guess overlooks what the Rams have done recently, Curtis. This Rams team has been very impressive over the last several weeks. Kyren Williams unlocked the running game. That helped unlock the offense. They beat the Browns last week. I'm not as much surprised by the Rams doing this. And the fact that they pushed the Ravens the way they did all the way in overtime, the Ravens ended up winning on a punt return touchdown. That doesn't really bother me that much with the Ravens because I kind of think the Rams are good. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, they moved the ball at will against a really good defense that has been good as of late in the rain when I've heard about how bad Matt Stafford is in the rain, and they continue to do it game after game. When Cooper, I did see a shout out to Deepak that Cooper Kupp should have been back to full health this week, and he looked good. And when him and both Puka are both healthy, they move the ball so well. And then they got Kyren Williams, who's doing a good job too. It's a fun team to watch because they are really good moving the ball, and the defense has played better than we probably expected them to this season. So we kind of wanted them to sneak it out and sneak into the back door of these playoffs because they'd be a fun team to watch, because I don't think out of all the teams at the bottom of that 6-7 race, they're the team I would least likely want to play. What happened there that you're... Oh my goodness.
Oh my. All right, we'll talk about that play if it stays.
For fantasy purposes, who gets those points?
Oh, okay. So we're gonna. All right. So it was a penalty anyway, so it's fine. It doesn't. So for those of you listening to the podcast and not watching along to this Chiefs and Bills game, they threw a pass to Travis Kelce, who Travis Kelce did Travis Kelce things, and ran down the field, was wide open down the field, and then threw it straight back to Kadarius Toney. I don't know if it was designed. Travis Kelce does that kind of stuff, so I don't know if it was designed. And Travis Kelce, and then Kadarius Toney rumbled into the end zone, but it got called back because I can't see what receiver that is. Oh, it might have been Toney himself.
Kadarius Toney line up off sides.
If you,
No way.
yeah. So if you saw my jaw just open up, that is what we're watching. But I want to get back to, we're gonna let this finish. I'll get back to this Ravens-Rams game, Tucker. I think that this was a big win for the Ravens because when we talk about the struggles they've had this year and the reason they're not like clearly the number one seed in the AFC right now, it's because of late game struggles. That is where they struggled. And they were tested in this game. They came up with a big 13-play, 75-yard touchdown drive. The defense did give up the field goal drive to send it to overtime. Then they come up with a punt return. This is not what we saw from the Ravens earlier in the season. The Colts game, for instance, and some of those games
this
that they
Ravens
lost
team looked a lot more competitive offensively. I thought they were a lot more balanced. You kind of look at, where Lamar Jackson spread out the ball. He had 24 completions. And I think 4 different guys had at least 4 or 5 catches. So I thought the offense played really well. And you mentioned, the drive that they scored with the Zay Flowers touchdown with about a minute to go to go ahead, I thought was one of their most impressive drives of the season. And they often sputtered in overtime, but it didn't really matter, right? Because they got the punt return touchdown from Wallace. But I was more intrigued or excited by the Rams and what they did offensively. Now, maybe we don't need to target Demarcus Robinson 10 times a game. That I thought was a little silly, that both he and Cooper Kupp are getting the same amount of targets, and one guy had 8 for 115. The other guy, I think, had 3 catches, though he did have a touchdown, but that's not necessarily great efficiency. But you look at these two teams right now, and I think it was encouraging on both sides. And Curtis mentioned, I think if, the Rams sneak into the back end of the NFC playoffs, which is certainly doable because it's wide open after the first 4 or 5 spots, they, I think, have a higher ceiling than pretty much any other team that could fill that role, whether that's the Packers or the Seahawks, wherever it may be. I think the Rams and what they're capable of doing offensively, the fact that they have guys on that team who have gone deep into the postseason, they won a Super Bowl just 2 years ago. I think the Rams could be a really, really intriguing team when we talk about how top-heavy the NFC could be. They could be a team that sneaks in to that 6 or 7 seed and really gives the team hell in Wild Card Weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be interesting because they actually play the 49ers in Week 18. And if the 49ers aren't the number one seed and they're sitting there in that 2 spot, that could be an interesting kind of situation for what the 49ers want to do. They get the Commanders, Saints, and Giants the next 3 weeks before that Week 18 game. They got a good chance to win all 3 of those. And with the way the Vikings are going, we'll see what the Packers are able to do against the Giants on Monday night. They have a very open path into the playoffs if they take care of their business. And so it's going to be interesting to watch. Let me get to this Chiefs game. Bills game looks like it's about to end. So before we do that, I do want to get in talk about Sharp Football Analysis and the promotion we have running over there. By the way, Sharp Football Analysis was on fire today with our DFS predictions, with our betting predictions, with our props. We were on fire today. I hope you were part of it. I hope you made a lot of money along with us. If you were not, you can go over to sharpfootballanalysis.com, use the promo code ANGLES. You can get 15% off every package we have available on the site. That means you get Rich Rebar's fantasy information, his worksheet previews that he does every week, his DFS work. You can get Curtis's waiver wire work. You can get Warren Sharp's betting recommendations that not just this week, but for the last 6 weeks have been on fire. Go make sure you check that out. Use promo code ANGLES for 15% off. We're looking here now at the 4th and 15. I'm just going to let it run here for a second. We have 4th and 15. It falls incomplete. The Bills get a much needed win in Kansas City. So let's talk a little bit about that game. And let's get started here with the Bills. The Bills, they won here. They're now moved to, I believe, 7-6. That puts them tied with a bunch of teams in the AFC. And so they're sitting here in an interesting spot. I think this was really their hardest game they had left. We've seen them play well and not win. Now we see them play well and win, Curtis. That's promising. And I'm feeling better about where they are right now, even though they probably should have won this game by more. The fact that they won it, I'm feeling better about this team maybe than I was going.
Yeah, they were really good to start. They do have the Cowboys and Dolphins down the stretch, so they really needed to win this game. But in the conference, some other teams dealt with some issues today, and we saw the Texans could have been dealt a couple of huge blows. We'll see what is the result of that. But they really put themselves in a spot right back in it, and I think they moved from odds on of not making the playoffs to a favorite to make the playoffs now. And again, this is a team where it doesn't matter where they get in. Once they're in, that is a team you don't want to play, because Josh Allen can beat you at any point in time with his legs, with his arm, if they just let him unloose. And they're a tough team. So if they go into the playoffs, they'll have some confidence too. So yeah, good to see them actually win one, because they've lost so many they shouldn't have already. So it's good to see they won this one, even if it was a Kadarius Toney offside penalty.
Yeah, they that play. If you didn't watch that play, go and watch that play. It was very, very interesting for sure. You mentioned they do have Dallas next week. I actually forgot about that game. At Dallas next week. That is tough. But I was thinking about they have the Chargers. We'll talk about Justin Herbert later. We don't know if Justin Herbert's even going to be playing in that game. Then they get the Patriots. I mean, that's a win. And then they get the Dolphins in Week 18. Currently, I believe if the Dolphins win on Monday night, they will be the number 1 seed. But they have a tough run of games coming up. And so, yeah, it's an interesting situation the Bills find themselves in. They pushed the Eagles to the brink before the bye. Now they beat the Chiefs. I think they've shown that this team is very good. This team deserves to be in the playoffs. Now it's up to them to go and win the games that they need to win. As for the Kansas City side of it, Tucker, I mean, it's Kansas City, so we can't panic. But should we be panicking here on Kansas City? Like, it hasn't been great lately.
No, it's weird. They've been so up and down. Like, this is now their 3rd loss in their last 5 games, 4th loss in their last 6, I believe. Right? They're 2-4 in their last
just
6
3.
games.
No, 3 of last 5. No, 3 of last 5.
Yeah, but they lost to Denver.
Oh no, you're right. Yeah,
so
you're right. That extra L hasn't showed up on my schedule yet. You are correct.
Yeah, it's 3 of 5. That's what got me confused at first. But yeah, 4 of the last 6, and you kind of look, and offensively, they just haven't been there. Like, they've had big games. They put up 41 against the Bears earlier in the season. They put up 31 against the Vikings 2 weeks ago, and we kind of all sat here and thought, well, that's what we expected. They're back. They're kind of figuring things out. And then they put up 19 in a really disappointing game against Green Bay. They only put up 17 today, and I don't really know what to think of this team, because as long as they have Patrick Mahomes, they're going to be favored in just about every single situation. And when we get into the postseason, even if there are the 3 seed or whatever it may be, I still think they're going to be a lot of people's pick to come out of the AFC, because they have him at quarterback. But just offensively, they do dumb things. And the Kadarius Toney penalty on that Travis Kelce play, I mean, that's just it. Like, as someone who lives in Philadelphia and had to watch a lot of terrible wide receivers for the last decade, Kadarius Toney kind of reminds me of that. Like, he reminds me of younger Nelson Aguilar. He reminds me of Jalen Reagor, where he doesn't even line up correctly. Like, he's electric with the ball in his hands. He's a big reason why they won the Super Bowl a year ago, but week in, week out, he's not a guy that necessarily can win you games. I think you can say that a lot about their receiving core right now. And, I thought it was interesting. There are a lot of people saying after they lost to the Eagles, well, they would have won if their wide receivers were better. Well, yeah, they built this team, though, with bad wide receivers, right? Like, that's the Chiefs' one big flaw. When they built this roster, they basically said Travis Kelce will be our skill position guy. Everyone else can be replacement level or below. And so far, that hasn't worked out. I mean, Travis Kelce's having still a great year by tight end standards, but probably taking a step back by his own standards. And so far, through 14 games, 13 games, Kansas City it seems like the worst team in the Patrick Mahomes era, and they just really can't seem to get out of their own way. It doesn't seem to be working the way it was the first 5 years of his career.
And Curtis mentions this a lot. I've been on this offense isn't actually that good thing. I've been on it for a while, and it continues to be the case. And their defense had been playing well. We saw some cracks emerge with that for sure in the Green Bay game, a little bit in this game as well, although the Bills, didn't really take advantage. And so, yeah, you put all that together and you think this team is not what we expect out of a Chiefs team, which no organization can be that great for that long, right? It is what happens. Even the Patriots had down years. It is kind of what we see, and they're going to make the playoffs. I mean, they have the Patriots next. They have the Raiders after that. They have then the Bengals and then the Chargers. They're still in a pretty good spot here in the division, even though the Broncos, man, can't stop winning. The Denver Broncos. We'll get to them later. The Broncos, I believe, are only a game behind, so that's a little bit of a concern. But we are, I feel pretty confident in that they're going to be in the playoffs. Probably going to be the number 3 seed, probably with everything that's going on in the AFC South. But it's just, the question about this team is ceiling. That's the question about this team, and the ceiling, Curtis, feels lower than the previous teams that we've been watching from Kansas City.
Yeah, I'm a believer. You know all. I was always high on this team and this offense. It was the first quarter of the game, and I was watching. I'm like, these guys, they don't have anything, and now they're down to CEH at a running back and Jerick McKinnon, who they can only give a couple carries before he gets tired. Then the receivers are dreadful outside our Rice. So, and Kelsey's slowing down. He's aged like so much this season. I don't know if that's off the field distractions, but I don't have any confidence in this team. And for the first time, Patrick Mahomes is going to have to play on the road in the playoffs. I don't think he's played on the road before, has he?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah, he's never played on the road in the postseason.
That's a true story. I'm not picking them to win that conference anymore.
Is that a real stat? Producer Matt, I need you to look up that stat.
I'm off the bandwagon. I thought it's Pat Mahomes and Spags has got a good defense. Well, the defense is starting to get banged up, and the offense they haven't shown it yet this year. So I don't know if they can just snap their fingers and make it better, because it hasn't gone that way yet. So I'm worried. I was always a believer these guys have the greatest quarterback in the game, and they'll figure it out. But I'm starting to worry.
We have a comment here in the chat, which I enjoy. The Bills are going to get in and somehow be favored on Wild Card Weekend, aren't they, from Tristan? I mean, yeah. I mean, if they're the well, maybe. Oh, that's going to be tricky. What if they come in and they are the 7th seed, and they're playing like the 2 seed? Let's say Dolphins, or end up as the 2 seed after their tough run of games. That'll be a fun game. We could watch the Dolphins and Bills play twice in 2 weeks. That could be the situation we're looking at. It's going to be a really interesting kind of finish this. And also, if you're like the Chiefs and the Dolphins, and you're trying to figure out who you want to play, I mean, if you think the Bills are going to be whatever seed you think the Bills are going to be, you probably don't want to be on the other side of that either. And so, it's going to be an interesting kind of run here as we move through these playoffs. All right, let's move on. There are a couple other games, obviously, that we need to get into. We need to talk about. We're talking about struggling teams. I mean, the Detroit Lions. It did not go well today. They didn't have the magic of a few weeks ago. They weren't able to come back late and beat the Bears. They ended up losing this time around to the Chicago Bears, who held on 28-13. If you look at the Lions' last 4 games, they had that miracle comeback against the Bears. They were beaten by the Packers. They gave up a big lead against the Saints last week before ultimately holding on. Now they were beaten by the Bears over the last 5 games. They've been up 38, 26, 29, 28, 28. We sounding alarm bells, Tucker. We worried about this Lions team officially now?
They feel like a real Lions team, right? The way they're fading. Now that it makes me more comfortable. Makes me feel like the world is kind of back in place. Now the Lions aren't the darling of the NFL, but it is a little worrisome that this team that maybe a month ago we talked about, like that Chargers game where they just kept coming back and kept fighting until the end. And I haven't seen this team quit by any means. They still have Dan Campbell's personality, but now they're digging up big enough holes and they're making enough mistakes where they can't kind of cross that threshold, right? And they're playing with such razor thin margins that if they don't come up with a big turnover in the fourth quarter, they aren't necessarily coming back. And I thought Chicago's played better the last couple of weeks. I thought Justin Fields has played better. I don't know if he's played well enough to save his job. I still think picking him over whoever's going to be the first pick at the draft, just even based on what their salary difference is going to be is a little silly to me. But yeah, if you're the Lions and, 2 weeks ago, you were kind of in the thick of it with the Eagles and 49ers and Cowboys, and a lot of people were picking them to, be the top seed in the NFC, right? Based on the Eagles' tough schedule and the fact that, the Eagles, Cowboys, and 49ers all had to play each other and beat each other up. There's a clear path for them. If they had beaten the Bears and they had beaten a couple bad teams, they could have easily coasted to the first seed and had a wild card weekend. And now I think they're kind of firmly entrenched in that 3 seed right now. They don't have a shot at the number 1 seed. They'll stay behind, whoever wins the NFC East and the 49ers. And that's going to be it. And luckily, they probably won't have to play the Cowboys or Eagles, who are going to be the 5 seed. But it's a little disappointing for a team that I think really up until about 3 weeks ago looked to be really on a war path to getting the first seed in the NFC. And now I think after a couple disappointing losses, they've kind of booted themselves out of that conversation.
What I'll say about their schedule the rest of the way is it looked a lot easier a few weeks ago. Like you mentioned the Bears. The Bears are playing pretty well. Their defense is playing pretty well as of late. This Bears roster is quietly not bad. And that's what makes this quarterback decision that they're going to have. And that's a conversation we can have on podcast much later. That's what makes this quarterback conversation they're going to have a little bit interesting. They get the Broncos this week on a short week because the NFL it has Saturday games the next, at least the next 2 weeks, maybe the next 3 weeks. Thank you, NFL. I really didn't like seeing my family during the holidays. I really appreciate that. But they get the Broncos on a short week. They get the Vikings twice over the final 3 weeks. Given what we've seen from the Vikings recently in their situation, maybe that's enough. But they have the Cowboys there, that Cowboys game right there in week 17. It's a bit of a tough run. I am with the Packers, and the Packers play on Monday night, and we'll see what they're able to do. If the Packers keep winning, do we have a division race on our hands, Curtis? Like, are we looking at a situation where we could have a shocking division race because the Lions' schedule is maybe tougher than we thought it was going to be?
Yeah, they play the Vikings twice, so the Vikings are still in reach too. Unfortunately, they're probably going to be without Justin Jefferson, but if they can get some quarterback issues figured out, the defense is playing really, really good under Brian Flores. So I'm throwing the Vikings into that mix too. So even if they go 1-1, yeah, that opens the door for the Packers to still give them a scare. And yeah, no one's scared of that Lions defense right now. So then they have to put up points, and we've seen Jared Goff do Jared Goff things in the back half of this season. So it's going to be interesting to see how that whole race plays out. And we were all lining up to crown them champions a couple weeks ago, and yeah, they've got some issues to fix there. I still think they get
Matt
it
has
done.
Confirmed. Yeah, I think they probably get it done because they have the Vikings are really falling apart. You mentioned it. We'll talk about it later with Justin Jefferson's injury. Nick Mullins came into that game. They only scored 3 points against the Raiders. Wasn't last second, but it was a late in the game field goal. That Vikings team they did not look good today. They lost Justin Jefferson to an injury. They lost Alexander Mattison to an injury. Tucker will talk about those in a second. But yeah, the Vikings are not doing great. They probably are going to be able to win those games, at least one of those games. That's going to be enough. But I do think the overall point here is that the Lions are really struggling, and they need Jared Goff to play better. Because the running game worked today against the Bears. Running game working against the Bears is a great sign. That Bears run defense is pretty good. Jared Goff was not hitting it today, and that's a concern. We've seen him turn the ball over. We have some worries here with Jared Goff, especially if they're not going to be playing indoors a lot, in the playoffs. So we'll see kind of where that goes. I don't really want to talk about the Raiders and Vikings, but I do, Tucker. We need to talk about the injuries in that game. It seemed like Justin Jefferson took a huge hit. They took him to the hospital for evaluation. I mean, that doesn't seem great. We saw Josh Jacobs leave this game. We saw Alexander Mattison leave this game. Lots of stuff going on from the injury front. So I'm giving it to you. Have fun with the injuries in this game.
Yeah, and I think from an NFL perspective, it probably doesn't really move the needle a lot. But from a fantasy perspective, like Justin Jefferson was the consensus number 1 pick in most fantasy leagues, and him coming back this week, right around the time playoffs start, probably could have helped a lot of teams. And maybe some people thought he'd be, sort of a league winning X factor for him. And yeah, he took a huge hit. It was almost to the side. Like he didn't get hit, head on in the sternum. He got hit sort of in the ribs, and then he got sent to the hospital, probably just to make sure it wasn't a punctured lung or anything like that. It was probably just to get further testing as a precautionary thing. I wouldn't be surprised if he's allowed to leave sometime later tonight and even maybe makes it home on the flight with the team. So I'm not terribly worried about, his health moving forward, but who knows if they even bring him back. And same thing, Alexander Mattison, I think it's probably going to be an ankle sprain. I'm not sure if they got an x-rays done yet, but just the way it twisted probably seemed like something like that. And same thing with, Josh Jacobs just got caught up with his knee and he was able to walk off the field, which is, a slightly encouraging sign, but he hasn't been necessarily the most effective running back this season. He's had a lot of tread on his tires since the beginning of last season. That might just finally be catching up with him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of with Jacobs how much he wants to press it, given where the Raiders are and his situation, as from a contract perspective, and so that's going to be a fascinating one to watch from a waiver perspective. Curtis, kind of what are we looking at with these three?
Yeah, a player that I was high on all year because I've been waiting for this Josh Jacobs injury. There was a stat at the beginning of the year, running backs who had touched the ball 300 times plus the previous year very, very seldomly finished the season, if ever. Him and Derrick Henry have bucked that trend this year, and I had to send Zamir White packing this week in some of my roster freezes, and we all know where Josh Jacobs was coming into the season. He doesn't really have a reason to come back now. The Raiders are out of it. Should he come back to play through an injury? I don't know. I think he's probably going to mail it in. I know he wasn't super happy with the organization to start the year. So it's one of those situations where you weigh all the options, and I think Zamir White will be the guy going forward. And it also gives the Raiders a chance to see what they have in him because they drafted him 2 years ago and haven't got to see him play yet. So we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to be high on Zamir White in home leagues this week. But again, that offense put up 0 points today. They've really kind of been they don't have a lot of imagination since the new head coach took over, but he's going to get touches. They do play the Colts one game down the stretch. That's a fantasy friendly environment, but yeah, what can we really expect from Zamir White? We're going to find out. I think it's kind of like Chase Brown situation. You got to give these guys some carries to find out what you have in them before you send these veterans off packing.
Chase Brown has juice, by the way. As I said throughout the offseason, and how excited I am about him as a player. If you play in dynasty formats, we'll see. Chase Brown. There's a decent chance Chase Brown is the starter in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow back next year. So I don't know. Just keep that in mind. The other name I think we have to bring up from a fantasy perspective is Ty Chandler. The Mattison injury, because he kind of got fell on a little bit. That one looked like it could be a multi-week thing. So that's a concern. And then we have the Vikings on a short week as well this week, going up against the Bengals on Saturday, I believe. And so Ty Chandler, if someone had thrown him back into the mix, then he's somebody to pay attention to as well. The Vikings win this game 3-0. I don't want to talk about this game. It's a nightmare. But they do have a 1-game lead now over the kind of just group of NFC teams, all at 6-7. The Rams are there after their loss we talked about before. The entire NFC South, except for the Panthers, who can we relegate the Panthers? Can we do that? Can we bring in some English football and relegate them? And then the Seahawks who lost to the 49ers today. And this game was interesting because I went into it. I believe the 49ers got to like 17-point favorites at one point because Geno Smith did not play in this game. We'll talk about that injury, maybe what you think of it here in a second, Tucker. But this was an interesting game because Drew Lock kind of played okay. Like he was kind of fine. The 49ers didn't like run away with this game, even though they were just stacking big play after big play after big play after big play on offense. It was just an interesting game to watch. It ended up exactly the way we thought it was going to be. The 49ers win relatively comfortably. But, it was an interesting game for the Seahawks, who have now, played good teams well recently. That makes me feel a little bit better about them. But, Tucker, it didn't look like Geno Smith was very close to playing, and if he's not, that makes this really tough.
Yeah, what's interesting is he injured his groin on Thursday in practice. That's when it kind of popped up, and Pete Carroll, as his normal Pete Carroll self, was very positive about the idea of him playing this week, and they said he was going to test him in pregame warmups, and he was a game time decision for today against San Francisco. And then Adam Schefter reported, I think it was yesterday, he reported that the team actually thinks this is a 2-week injury. There's no shot he's going to play today. Probably no shot he plays next week against the Eagles. And Drew Lock, I thought, was fine. Like, as someone who's kind of watching that game, kind of with the eye of looking ahead to next week to seeing, what he might look like against the Eagles after they get through this tough stretch of great quarterback play, maybe getting to play a backup would be a nice reprieve for that defense. I mean, Drew Lock just looked like an NFL quarterback. The Seahawks offense wasn't the reason they lost today. They turned the ball over a couple times. He threw a couple picks. They got really, really frustrated at the end of the game, which seems to be something the 49ers are good at doing to opposing teams. This isn't the 1st time.
DK Metcalf wanted to fight every single 49ers defender. I don't know what they were saying to him. I don't know what they were doing to him, but he was angry. Like, he was mad on that.
Yeah, and you saw last like the Eagles 49ers game got a little chippy last week too. I think that's just, the 49ers play such a physical brand of football, and they know how good they are, and they've talked a lot of trash this year. So, I think the frustration kind of boiled over for Seattle. But yeah, I don't know if the drop off from Geno Smith to Drew Lock is maybe as big as we thought it was before today, and it's going to be tough because I think Seattle right now, I don't know if this is necessarily a must-win game for them, but I think going into next week against Philadelphia certainly is going to be a must-win game when you kind of look at the scope of everything at the bottom of the NFC and that the wild card playoff picture. Next week could be a huge game for them when it comes to their playoff chances.
I'd say the good news for the Seahawks, they've lost 5 of 6, and they're still only 1 game out. So that is where we are in the NFC. Speaking of the NFC, Curtis, do you have anything to say about the NFC South? I mean, Baker Mayfield leads a game-winning drive. The Bucs beat the Falcons. They are at 6-7. The Falcons are at 6-7. The Saints are at 6-7 after crushing the Panthers. The Bucs technically are in the lead of that division. They all play each other still down the stretch. I mean, I don't know. I'll throw my hands up. I have no idea what's going to happen in the NFC South. I'll just sit here and watch it and then hope for the best. This is the wildest division.
Instead of just relegating the Panthers, let's just relegate the entire NFC South and be done with that, because no one wants to win this division, and it's going to come down to the last game, and these guys all play each other one more time. I think they all play the Panthers, but right now my money's on Baker Mayfield. He's actually balling out when he's given the opportunity to. He's made some really good plays this year. I don't think that offensive line is all that good, and he hasn't taken a lot of sacks this year, which he normally does. And I'm thinking he's playing the best out of all the quarterbacks, so I'll give them the slight advantage heading down this final 3 weeks. But who knows how that's going to turn out, and who cares? For what? To get smoked by the Cowboys? Please, Cowboys, don't lose to one of these teams. Do not lose to one of these teams.
We are, by the way, we could be facing a hellscape in which 2 of these teams get into the playoffs. They are all 3 of them are only 1 game behind the Vikings right now. And we'll see what the Packers do on Monday night. But all 3 of them could be within 1 game of the playoffs.
They'll self-implode. They've all self-imploded all year. Only one is getting in. That is the rule. Only one is allowed to get in.
Wouldn't that be the most fun of all time if we get all 3 of them? How about that? With the Vikings, they can't find a quarterback. I don't know. Maybe the Rams have an injury. The Packers, Jordan Love, turns back into a pumpkin. I don't want that to happen. Jordan Love keeps playing very well. But there's a path here, right? Let's do it. Get all 3 of them in. That'll be great for the playoffs and for viewing numbers. Let's move over to the AFC playoff picture, which is more interesting, I think, because they're actually good teams over there. What I will say is that I think the biggest development in the AFC playoff picture goes beyond wins and losses, and it's what happened to the Texans today, both losing that game and then on the injury front. Tucker, they lost CJ Stroud in that game. They lost Nico Collins in that game a week after losing Tank Dell, right, for the season. They lost Will Anderson in that game. I mean, it was a rough day for the Texans for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely a reality check. And obviously the biggest name is CJ Stroud, right? Because he's been the biggest revelation for that team. But it's weird because normally if a quarterback got a concussion really up until midseason this year, I'd say he's guaranteed to miss next week, might miss 2 weeks. And we've now seen probably about a half dozen players in the last 3 or 4 weeks come back from a concussion the very next week. Derek Carr did it today. He was in concussion protocol all week and he was healthy and active today. So, as bad as it looked, because his head really slammed against the turf and bounced back. When he got hit, it wasn't one of those concussions where you find out he was in the medical tent 5 minutes later and you have to go search for the play where he got hurt. But for this team right now, and kind of just there's so many 7-6 teams in the AFC right now. It's unbelievable. There's 6 of them. Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Houston, Denver, Cincinnati, and Buffalo are all 7-6 right now.
Yeah.
And then you have Cleveland, who has the top wild card spot at 8-5 right now. I mean, you legitimately have 7 teams all fighting for 3 playoff spots right now, all within a game of the top wild card spot, or maybe even their division right now, since Kansas City and Jacksonville are both 8-5 in front of their divisions. It's really interesting for a conference that may not have the top end teams, as we talk about the best teams maybe being the Eagles, 49ers, or Cowboys. But I mean, the depth of the AFC right now is just astounding. Like, I can't think of another year where, the 11th place team right now in the AFC, we're talking about maybe being favored on wild card weekend if they're on the road, being the Bills. Like, that's crazy. Like, who's
Wild.
the 11th seed in the NFC right now? It's the Saints, who, stink.
They're still in it.
Saints.
They could still make the playoffs multiple different ways. It's crazy.
Just absolutely catching strays, these poor Saints. I'm telling y'all are going to be eating crow when we have the all NFC South wildcard weekend. Y'all are going to be eating crow for sure. For the Texans here, like we said, like Tucker said, we don't know what'll happen with Stroud because the assumptions we had about concussions earlier in the year have not held up recently, and so we'll just have to see. But I know from a fantasy perspective, they get the Titans this week. They have the Titans again in week 17. They had the Browns in week 16, so we weren't getting excited. We were getting excited about what we were going to see from CJ Stroud in the playoffs. I don't know what we're going to see now, Curtis. Nico Collins, I don't know how serious that injury is. I'm a lot more worried now about what we're going to get from a fantasy perspective from this team in the playoffs than I was a few hours ago.
Yeah, I've got to send some Christmas presents back for my kids that I ordered because my bags are packed full of Nico Collins. And looking at the Tennessee Titans twice with Stroud, that was just a match made in heaven for the fantasy playoffs. And I don't know how that'll all play out. Whether now maybe John Mechie gets a chance to play a bit more because now you're down Dell and possibly Collins. You're strolling out Noah Brown, Robert Woods, and John Mechie. That's quite the difference from a couple weeks ago. So it also brings Stroud's ceiling down too. Even if I'm sure it'd be fine, he'll get through the concussion protocol because that doesn't exist once week 12 hits. So it just he'll be okay to go. But with those weapons, we've seen some of these other teams struggle because they don't have anyone to throw to. You got Brevin Jordan running up the middle and a couple different running backs that can't get anything going. And so, I'm worried for the Texans. This was such a great story all year. And now to see Dell last week and now Nico and Stroud this week, it's falling apart in a hurry. And it's sad to see because I think everyone is rooting for them. They're the one kind of team everyone is kind of getting behind.
Yeah, no, I was excited about the Texans. I am from Houston, but I'm not a Texans fan. I'm an Oilers fan. I still have not forgiven anybody for that happened in my relative youth. So, but yeah, no, I was excited about this team. But I mean, you can't give up 300 passing yards to Zach Wilson. That's one thing you can never do. Never ever allow that. That's not helping. And then obviously, the injuries. It's a tough situation. We'll see kind of where we go from here. I mentioned they do have to play the Browns in week 16. They have to play the Browns. Talking about the Browns beat the Jaguars. They were able to hold on today, even though Trevor Lawrence led a late comeback. The Browns were able to hold on. They, after the game, named Joe Flacco the starter for the rest of the season, which makes perfect sense. His stats haven't been great. He only has a 55% completion, 6.3 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But that is light years ahead of where we were with Donovan. With DTR. I'm sorry, Tucker, with PJ Walker. He's available now. The Eagles should go pick him up. Would you rather have PJ Walker or Marcus Mariota? would you want? But so this offense has at least been working. The defense is getting healthier. This Browns team could be dangerous in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I said a couple weeks ago, I thought their defense might be the best unit across the NFL. Just the way they're able to drag that team to wins throughout the middle of the season. And it's kind of crazy. Like, Joe Flacco hasn't been great, but it's been okay. It's been competent. Like, he hasn't turned the ball over the way the other two quarterbacks have, and that's been enough, right? Like, that's been more than enough for them to win. And I think if I were a Jets fan right now, wouldn't you be really upset? Like, at least Cleveland's trying throughout the season, right? Like, they're going out and adding guys. They're trying to find guys off the street. And the Jets this week just went back to Zach Wilson and, shrugged their shoulders and say, hey, what do you want us to do? We're waiting for Aaron Rodgers to get back.
Threw for 300 yards today. We cannot talk bad about Zach Wilson today. Next week, we'll be right back to talking bad about him. But my man did his thing today. Congratulations, Zach Wilson. You did it. You threw for 300 yards. I'm proud of the fella. We had to talk nice about it.
It may be ill-timed, but I mean, there's a reason why the Jets have fallen to where they are, and the Bills have, risen to 8-5. And I just think it's impressive the way this team has continued to win despite legitimately not having a starting quarterback the entire season.
Or running back.
And that's the most impressive part.
That too. Their best offensive player has been out since like week 3 or 4.
They're literally their best player. Yeah. So it's been a great season of resiliency, I think, from the Browns. And like I said, if that defense gets healthier, I think they lost Delpit in this game, right? And so, we'll see kind of what goes with that. And Flacco can literally just stay on the tracks. That is better than where they had been. It's going to be interesting to watch them. As for the Jaguars, they've lost 2 in a row now. They have the Ravens coming up this week. I guess the good news, Curtis, is Trevor Lawrence didn't look like he was too hobbled by the ankle. I mean, he did throw 3 interceptions. His accuracy wasn't quite there. Maybe that's where we saw the ankle injury, but he led that big comeback. All of those are good signs for this Jaguars team, especially as the other teams around them in their division seem to be crumbling. Even though they've lost 2 in a row and have the Ravens this week, having Lawrence at least look fine is probably a good development.
Yeah, that's the second time this season Trevor Lawrence has been iffy going into a game, and they might be 2 of his better games that he's played all year. I think it was against the Saints when he didn't practice and he was coming in with a knee injury. They absolutely crushed the Saints earlier in the season. And today, I just assumed that they were going to put up 0 offense with no offensive line against the Browns, and they did a hell of a job. But more concerning is that team's defense is kind of like the Detroit Lions defense. They are getting absolutely scorched through the air, and that's a concern moving forward, but really fun for fantasy, because I think next week, if the Ravens are missing a couple pieces in their secondary, we could get into a shootout there with Lamar and Trevor Lawrence. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, I was amazed with what Lawrence put on the field today. He looked really good. He even ran it a couple times. So that shocked me. I just assumed they were putting up 0 points and moving on to next week and trying to win in the last couple weeks to win the division.
Really good, except for 3 interceptions. We have to throw that.
Wow.
We have to throw that.
It's still a really good defense. It's a really good defense.
Yeah, that's true. That is fair. Like I said, they get the Ravens this week, but then they get the Bucks, Panthers, and Titans. So they have a pretty easy run the rest of the way after that Ravens game. Real quick, we need to go through some other AFC games here. Bengals ended up pulling away from the Colts for a big win, 1-2 in a row. I mean, I had left the Bengals for dead, Tucker. I left them for dead when Burrow was lost for the season. But as it stands right now, they are tied for the final playoff spot did a great job designing things for Jake Browning. The defense wasn't as terrible today as it has been. I mean, Vikings, Steelers, Chiefs, Browns down the stretch. That's tough. Can they do it? I don't know. It's a really weird situation. It's a really interesting situation here with the Bengals.
My dream for the Bengals and for the city of Cincinnati, as someone who works in sports radio, there have to be people who are saying, you know what? We're good enough with this Browning kid. I don't know why we gave Joe Burrow all that money. Like, I need that to be a storyline in the offseason in Cincinnati. I don't know what kind of sports scene they have in Cincinnati. I don't know what they do while they eat their Skyline chili. I don't know if they have people with takes like that in Cincinnati calling into sports talk radio. But if this were Philadelphia and that was happening, like, that would be the conversation all summer. Would be Jake Browning's good enough. We don't need Joe Burrow in his big contract. Let's stick with the young kid. But it's just, I don't know. It's interesting for a team that, like you said, we left for dead 2 or 3 weeks ago to all of a sudden be coming back, and they're right in the thick of it, right? They're one of those 6, 7, and 6 teams, and they very well could find themselves right in the middle of the playoff hunt, despite the fact they put their franchise quarterback on the shelf 3 weeks ago.
I can't believe you said what might happen. Didn't David Carr just call for Marcus Mariota to start this week? Like, didn't that just happen?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I think PJ Walker might be better than Marcus Mariota. So when you brought that up, I thought that might be a real actual upgrade on Mariota. So sorry, David Carr.
That was fun, David. That was fun. On the Colts side, real quick, Curtis, they lose this game. They still sit here at 7-6. This team, I never really had a lot of faith they were going to stay in it. I was disappointing in their offense, their running game, their defense still isn't good. I just think there are better teams. If I was trying to take this giant group of 7-6 teams and whittle it down to who I really think has a chance, I think that I would take the Colts out of that list pretty quickly, which means you should probably bet on the Colts to make the playoffs. But that's kind of where I sit with the Colts.
Yeah, Zach Moss didn't get in the end zone today. That's back-to-back weeks that he's been a chalk DFS play and he got a touchdown taken back by a penalty today. And yeah, he's looked really terrible since Jonathan Taylor's went out, when he looked like one of the best running backs in the league before he got paid. So very interesting situation how that kind of turned there. And yeah, their offense hasn't really been clicking. Michael Pittman is going to get paid this offseason. He looks really good, but outside that, they really don't have anyone to throw the ball to. Josh Downs has kind of faded away the last couple weeks and made a couple catches today, I think. But it's, other than Pittman, they don't really have anyone to go to. The running game fell apart, and the defense still isn't very good. So I think you're right. They're the odd men out come down the last couple weeks.
Will Mallory caught 5 for 46 today. The cavalcade, they have like 3 tight ends they throw to regularly. That's never a great sign if that's what's happening on offense. Finally, last thing to talk about here, and how far have the Chargers fallen? That the last thing we're going to talk about here is the fact that Justin Herbert broke his finger, Tucker, and we might be missing him for a while. How far have the Chargers fallen? But that's kind of where we are with them right now. What do you know about it?
So it is a broken finger. It's on his throwing hand, and it's crazy. Like, he played through a broken finger earlier in the season, although it was on his left hand, so it wasn't that crazy. This one, I don't think he'll be able to play through based on where they are in the season. I think it makes it silly for him to do it just because of all the ground they have to make up just to be back in playoff contention in the last 4 weeks of the season. So I think we're going to get some Easton Stick, the pride of North Dakota State. We're going to get some Easton Stick snaps next week. And, I think it's crazy that both Carson Wentz and Easton Stick are in LA, and Easton Stick is the guy who's starting games, not Carson Wentz. How about that?
If I'm remembering correctly, I've tried to remember back to my long ago Easton Stick college stats. Easton Stick could run a little bit, right? Am I remembering that right, Curtis?
I believe so.
Excited?
Yeah.
I'm from Canada. Every time you say Easton Stick, I just go straight to hockey. So I don't even know.
It sounds like a hockey stick.
I don't know if this is a real football player or what.
I don't even know what hockey is. Yeah, no, he ran for a lot in college. There we go. Maybe we'll have some fun Konami Easton Stick moments. Herbert, it's going to be the story. The fact of the matter is that the Chargers weren't moving the ball and they were losing, and the Broncos were dominating this game before Justin Herbert left. The Broncos were the better team in this game. We've seen this layup to the threes approach from Russell Wilson. He hit a 3 with Cortland Sutton, who made yet another touchdown catch here, Curtis. This team, it didn't work last week. It almost did, even though they turned the ball over a lot, but right back into the flow, right back into being the Broncos. They get the struggling Lions next, and the Patriots, the Chargers again, and then the Raiders. I mean, this could be happening.
I don't know what their odds were to make the playoffs after their, what were they, 0-4, 0-5? And they just, Sean Payton looked like he should have stayed retired, and now they're right back in it. And yeah, Cortland Sutton is doing everything right. Jerry Jeudy is doing everything wrong. Looked like he had bet against Russell Wilson overs today. He had a ball right.
He didn't even look
right.
like
he didn't try to catch
didn't
one.
Even look like
and
he
then
knew.
He didn't try to put his feet in.
He didn't look like he knew where he was, like that he was in the corner of the end zone. He didn't even attempt to get his second foot down.
There was a pass earlier where he just didn't even like make an attempt to catch it, and he was wide open. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, yeah, what a pick that was, Jerry Jeudy. But yeah, these guys continue to win. It's incredible. I would have never predicted this, but good on them. Russ is just doing enough to get it done. The defense shored up some holes, and they look really good. And yeah, with their schedule coming in the way it is, I think they could beat the Lions next week. And then you got the Patriots. Heck, they could even give the Chiefs a run for their money at some point in time.
Yeah, that is when I look at that schedule. That is the one thing where I go,
Russell Wilson is catching up to Patrick Mahomes in the standings. What would have that odds been after week 4?
I do think if I was trying to guess who the final 3 AFC teams would be, I probably would guess Browns, Bills, Broncos. That'd probably be where I'd stand right now, heading into it. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be really interesting to kind of watch the rest of the season. What about from the waiver wire? Did we miss anybody on the waiver wire, Curtis?
Ty Chandler, Zamir White. Those are going to be nice running back hits for people who are and. Chandler gets the Bengals run defense, which has struggled as of late, except when they play Zach Moss. But we'll save that for another day as well. Easton Stick, he's got some legs, man. So he's gonna put up some points probably with his feet. Yeah, he's got just throw the ball to Keenan Allen. That's all you got to do. Run and throw the ball to Keenan Allen. We've seen it work for a quarterback in Cincinnati. So just keep it simple.
We didn't have any scrambles today, so maybe we're gonna be unhappy with whatever we saw. He did connect on a long pass to Quentin Johnston. There was a brief 2-play Easton Stick and Quentin Johnston takeover. What a time to be alive! What a fun time for everybody. What about injuries? We missed anybody, Tucker? Any important injuries we missed?
I don't think so. I think we hit everybody. We mentioned Kyle Hamilton probably needs reevaluation. He's been a huge part of that Baltimore defense this year. But he'll probably get tested on Monday after his knee injury. But that's the only other big one that I saw today. Other than that, I mean, does Aaron Rodgers get activated? Who knows?
I'm gonna bet against that. I would take decent odds against that for sure. All right, well, that's it for us then. Reminder, we do this every single Sunday live on YouTube, 7:30 Eastern. Go to YouTube, search Warren Sharp. You'll find it. Subscribe. Come and join us. Join the chat. Put in comments. We would love to have you. Also, remember, you go to sharpfootballanalysis.com. I believe I saw Warren Sharp put in our Slack that we went 9-0 on NFL sides today. Is that what he put in there? Something to that effect.
Something like that, yeah.
We were on fire today. Props were on fire today. We've been doing awesome for literally, it's been a month and a half. We've been on fire. Come and join us. Use promo code ANGLES for 15%
and DFS picks. Rich is on a heater, man.
Yeah, and this is the time of year because of Rich Rebar's approach. This is the kind of year that Rich Rebar cleans up. So if you want to get involved in all of that, there's the NFL Plus package is perfect for that. Go and check it out. Again, promo code ANGLES 15% off. And we 3 will be back to talk to you next week.